Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. We're going to give it a couple more minutes to let everyone attend that is not yet on. So hold tight, and we'll be back in about a minute or two. Thank you.
All right, are we?
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Time and Attendance and Organizational Planning Solution webinar presented by Insperity. My name is Helen Dion. I am the Marketing Manager for SWK Technologies. Your presenters today will be Greg Peterman and Glenn Pearson. We will be recording the webinar, so a recording will be distributed to everyone tomorrow, whether or not they attended. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Everyone has been placed on mute to keep the background noise down. However, you can submit any questions you have throughout the webinar. To submit a question, just look for the question section on your GoToWebinar pod on the right side of your screen, and we will answer all questions at the end of the presentation. So we appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to attend, and I will now pass it over to Greg.
All right. Can you hear me okay, Helen?
Yes, you're clear.
All right. All right, good. All right, well, welcome everybody. So my name is Greg Peterman. I'm a Business Development Manager with Insperity. I work with the SAGE partner community, helping with these various webinars, helping with customer questions, customer situations, and whatnot. I've been working with SWK for a number of years now, and we're very excited to have this opportunity to present to all of you. We're very fortunate to have on the line with us Glenn Pearson. So Glenn's title is Technical Consultant. I prefer to consider him more of a master of all time, space, and dimension because he knows just about everything there is about time and attendance. So I like to play a game called Stump Glenn. So if you all have questions as we go through this, please do ask them, even if they're technical. We may need to take it offline, but he doesn't get stumped very often. So there's a challenge for everybody. So what we're going to be covering today is I'm going to talk a little bit about who is Insperity, and then we're going to get into the products themselves. So we're going to get into Sage OrgPlus RealTime by Insperity. So that is a product that Sage has endorsed as a add-on solution that complements their various offerings. So we'll go through a brief overview. We're going to touch on a little bit of a typical customer profile, and then we'll go through some of the key features and benefits, showing you some of the screens and what it looks like. From there, we're going to jump into Sage Time and Attendance by Insperity. So again, this is a endorsed solution from Sage. So they realized they needed a time and attendance offering to help shore up their HR and payroll services, or solutions rather. So we're going to get into that again, an overview, go through a customer profile, and then we're going to turn this over to Glenn. He's going to go in and do a live solution overview where you can actually see the software and how it interacts with various data points from when the employees are punching in and out, the ability for an employee to view their time off balances, how a supervisor can interact with it and whatnot. And then we'll move into the finishing steps, which will hopefully be lots of questions from you all. So let's go ahead and jump in. So Insperity was founded back in 1986. So we've been showing companies how to harness the power of HR and improve their business success since then. We've grown from 2 people in a small office to a $3.3 billion company with 60 offices across the country. And I believe we have about 3,200 employees today. So we're one of the country's most comprehensive HR services providers, and we're still innovating. So we like to think of it as it's not just what we do, it's a calling for us. So jumping into Sage OrgPlus RealTime by Insperity. What are the benefits here? So quick overview. So it's right now the world's #1 organizational charting software. Insperity OrgPlus helps you build a solid organizational structure that ensures your workforce is aligned and set up for success. So there's a lot of customizable fields in there. It's a very data-rich online org charting and planning tool. It's fully web-based, so it can help you model and plan for changes as well as track key metrics in real time. So it's a way that you can visualize your data is another way that we like to say that. So checking those key metrics in real time, it's going to allow you to be sure your people and your business goals are always aligned. You can quickly create professional organizational charts in less time. You can import data from just about any data source. So, you can bring in not only your traditional org charts, but you can bring in time and attendance type information, salary information. You can do kind of if-then planning scenarios. If you're going through mergers and acquisitions, you can look at your talent and see who you might want to keep and who, unfortunately, you might need to let go. So there's a lot of various uses within the system. And we're still figuring it out as we continue to use it and implement it with our customers. It's just a very, very strong solution. So you can choose from a variety of publication options as well. So you can do, Word, HTML, navigable PDFs, PowerPoints, and whatnot. You can publish these charts to your intranet, network drive, the email distribution. And on top of that, you get to take advantage of the in-the-cloud infrastructure. So there's no desktop hardware. There's a limited initial investment, and it's compatible with pretty much your favorite browser of choice. So you could easily begin designing your charts using drag and drop functionality, and harness the power of organizational planning. So a quick snapshot on some of our customers. You'll recognize some of these. So the Yankees, Boeing, Costco, so some very large organizations. But also we have companies with 25 employees who are rapidly growing. And because of that, they recognize that they need to be doing the charting. They need to plan for future growth and where they're going to need additional resources. So there is no limit to how many employees you can be charting. And there's really no limiting factor as far as too few. Again, if it's a small company and you're growing, this is something that can really help you be more efficient. So with HR metrics at your fingertips, gone are the days of sitting in a boardroom with organizational charts made on drawing tools and passed around and scribbled on. You're able to visualize your HR data proactively, so you can plan for now and the future. So a dynamic org chart gives you hard evidence of how your teams are divided, where salaries are spent, and where responsibilities are centered. You can visualize KPIs, so you can set up views that are important to your company for measuring your key performance indicators. So view data at a glance so you can make better decisions. Dynamic org chart can help you discern ahead of time when there's a lack of experience in a particular department. Then you can identify a tenured employee to transfer into that area so that newer staff members can be recruited into departments elsewhere. So again, you may have a lot of talent in one group and maybe not so much in another. You can pretty quickly identify that through these various KPI views and make adjustments as needed. And don't forget, you can also do more of a if-then. What would happen if we moved Jamie Hernandez over to report under Cynthia? How does that impact wages? How does that impact the reporting structure, tenure on the team, and whatnot? So if your company operates from multiple locations, here's another one where that kind of if-then hypothetical modeling can help you. So this org chart program can help you optimize the composition of your teams across the organization. Someone may be underutilized on a lower priority project, and they may be open to working in another office on a higher priority project, but you have to be able to identify those strengths and weaknesses and where you might be able to make changes. So the dynamic organizational chart program is going to help you easily drag and drop these roles to build the hypothetical management structures ahead of anticipated growth. Again, I mentioned mergers and acquisitions. So this is another very powerful tool. A reduction in force is not something anyone necessarily wants to do, but if you do have to, it'd be nice to be able to identify what talent you want to keep, what talent you should keep, and how you can merge those into the new company. So a solid organizational charting strategy can help you take a more targeted approach to personnel issues and give you more time to spend growing your company. Again, a little more on the mergers and acquisitions. All companies at some point grow or shrink, and to be educated and thinking about it ahead of time, it can really help with that smooth transition. So creating these plans, going to show you what your new co is going to look like, show the redundant positions, you can meet headcounts and budget targets, and keep that top talent for the new organization. The last piece is succession planning. And after this, we're going to go ahead and transition over to talking about time and attendance. But succession planning, it's a planning tool that's going to help companies identify the organization's key roles and determine high potential employees who could fill those roles in the event of vacancy. So, you're looking at a CEO who is approaching retirement. You could do some succession planning and modeling. It's going to allow you to do planning for up to 10 internal or external candidates to add to those key positions and plan for success. On top of that, that can be shared with other users, so everyone is in on making informed decisions on the potential replacements for that role. All right, so let's get into time and attendance. So Sage Time and Attendance by Insperity. Again, it's an endorsed solution from Sage, and we're going to get into how we integrate with some of the various Sage solutions. Before we do that, just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the strengths there. So what is it? It is a self-monitoring web-based system that allows users to sit back as Sage Time and Attendance holds your employees accountable for everyday accuracy and dependability. So companies can collect time tracking data online with web punching. They can do it on the road via mobile devices. You can use telephony, where you dial in and press 1 to punch in, 2 to punch out. You can do on-site biometrics. So if you have an issue with buddy punching, you could use a biometric device to ensure that whoever is punching is in fact themselves. And then, of course, more traditional badge-based time clocks, where you swipe a badge, or maybe you have a security key fob to get into your building, and you can use that same fob then to punch in and out on the time clock. And you can use any combination of those. Supervisors and managers can receive alerts for impending overtime conditions, so they can make proactive scheduling changes before it occurs. We like to talk about that typically overtime is managed in the rearview mirror. So, I already passed that exit. I know what happened. Whereas with a fully implemented and thought out solution around time and attendance, you have the ability to see that overtime is going to happen and make proactive adjustments to that. Perhaps send Bob home early at noon so he doesn't get all that overtime on Friday, if you have the capacity. But at the very least, it's going to happen, as opposed to, it already did happen. So in addition to that, you have automated attendance tracking and alerting. So tardies and absenteeism, early outs and whatnot, management can be notified of any of those situations, so that, again, you can take proactive measures to ensure that you have coverage. If somebody is absent, that job still needs to be done. So all the business rules for your organization are also going to be set up in the system, such as your overtime, shift premiums, your PTO time, so how you accrue time off. That's part of the system. All of that information is collected, your rules are all applied, and at that point, you're ready to pass it off to payroll. There's no data entry. It's fully integrated, and I'll get into that on the next slide here in just a second. But your employees and managers have an intuitive self-service experience to assist them in their day-to-day activities. An employee doesn't need to call payroll and ask for the time off balance. They don't need to fill out a piece of paper and put it on their supervisor's desk asking to have the day after Independence Day off. They're able to do everything in the system online so that the employee is informed about what's happening. The manager is informed about what's going on. They can see they have coverage. That's all built into the system. And ultimately, the administrators of the system, HR, payroll, finance, depending on your structure, are also going to have insight into all of that information so that you can make informed decisions. So how do we integrate with Sage? A lot of different Sage products out there, so we're just going to call it Sage as a whole instead of getting into product specific. But typically, we're going to be importing all of the employee demographics, your code tables, so what are your department codes, job codes, whatnot. We're going to import changes to employment status as well. So this is typically a daily feed. So we're going to grab data from your Sage product of choice, bring it into Sage Time and Attendance. Again, we're going to have all of your rules set up within the system. On top of that, we also have some static type scheduling and advanced scheduling that are available. So if you happen to be in hospitality industry that's notorious for shift changes and scheduling challenges, so we do have more of an advanced scheduling offering that allows you to make sure you have enough cooks, enough wait staff, somebody to be in the bar, whatever the case may be, or in long-term healthcare, make sure you have enough LPNs, CNAs, RNs, dietitians. So that type of scheduling can be done in the system as well. So then, if you look down here in the bottom section, you can see you have various ways of collecting the time. So you have your traditional time clocks, your biometric devices. You certainly can punch in and out from a PC, a tablet, a kiosk. A lot of people will put a tablet in a break room so that the employees can clock in and out right there. After the fact, timesheet entry. So we're very much trending towards your salaried exempt staff also tracking their time. Here at Insperity, for example, again, we have 3,200 employees. Everybody fills out a timesheet. So at the end of every pay period, Glenn and I go in, we fill out a timesheet, and it's just from a accountability standpoint and from an auditing standpoint. We're saying we work these hours, we're being paid for these hours. It's just dotting the I's and crossing the T's. And more and more, we're seeing customers also getting their salaried non-exempt staff plugged into the system. So that's where the timesheet entry comes into play. If you happen to be my father, you may have a phone that looks like this one, a flip phone. Yes, he still has that, or a BlackBerry, which I think, no, I won't get into that. But the point here is really any telephone you can do a whole lot with. So telephony, dialing in and punching in and out. You can do crew punching. So if you have a group of people out in the field with, say, a foreman on site, that foreman can punch those 7 people in and out for lunch and back from lunch as the work occurs. You also have the ability to punch in and out from a smartphone. There's even an app available. So it's a smartphone URL. So if you have a connection, you can clock in and out in real time, or there is a mobile app available as well. So when we take all of that information now that's in Sage Time and Attendance, we're bringing in your punches, we're applying your schedules, we're calculating your overtime and your various local, state, and federal Department of Labor regulations. So that's all in the system. Managers and supervisors can see it. They're able to approve all of that time. Then your payroll department can make sure everyone's been approved. And at the end of the period, they can go ahead and export that time into the payroll module of choice, whatever that may be, whether it's Sage 100, Sage 300, HRMS, etc. So that's going to pass over all your calculated hours, benefit time, any given dollars, maybe you're tracking mileage. All of that is going to flow into payroll. You run your reconciliation reports between the two systems to make sure they match. And if they do, you're ready to start processing. So in just a moment, we're going to get into a live demonstration, which Glenn is going to take us through, but just wanted to real quick touch on a few of the time and attendance companies. So retail, Blaine's Farm and Fleet, That's a big one. Goodwill, so nonprofits. We have a lot of nonprofits we work with. Medieval times, so Dinner and a Tournament. If anyone remembers the movie Cable Man, great movie. Anyway, so long-term healthcare. Really, you name an industry, and we're probably in it. Some we're very strong in. So again, retail and long-term care, manufacturing. Those are right there in our sweet spot. So we talked about data collection. If anyone has any questions on the data collection, please be sure to note those. As Helen asked at the beginning, we will have time for Q&A here at the end. But for now, let's go ahead and jump into the Sage Time and Attendance Overview by Glenn. So Glenn, I'm going to go ahead and make you the presenter. And,
thank you, Greg.
Yeah, there we go. You should be all set now.
Very good. Let me just coordinate what you're going to see. And if I got this right, you should see a clock that says 10:21, Greg.
Yes, sir. We are seeing it.
Great. So, Greg, that was a great explanation of what the Sage Time and Attendance platform can do. We're going to see some of those screens fleshed out here live. And I encourage you to fire off any questions that you have about scenarios that are specific to your organization. Put those in the question box, and we'll make sure to address them, or as Greg mentioned in the opener, take them offline and deal with you one-on-one to see how the solution would apply to that scenario. The presentation also is as fluid as can be. So, Greg, anyone has any feedback during the presentation, please also include them in the questions so that we can continue to improve these presentations and address your situations directly. The format for today's demo is going to be that of a day in the life, and we're going to follow along in a day in the life of various users, how they do some of the data entry options that Greg talked about, and the checks and balances that are built into the platform to ensure at the end of these processes, the data sent to the various Sage payroll platforms is as accurate as possible, and that all of the audit trail and all of the detail will always be within Sage Time and Attendance for you to refer to in the future. Gone, if you're still doing it manually, gone are the days of having to save old timesheets in many boxes in a closet somewhere. You can have it all online at your fingertips forever. So we're going to start with our hourly situation. Her name is Terry. Terry is trying to log on to the Sage Web Punch that Greg just showed us a screenshot for. And it's very simple. This could have come from, if you have HRMS, through a single sign-on. So you can also get rid of the need to have extra passwords for your employees. This can become one as far as signing on to with your HRMS system. So Terry's logging in, and she's presented with these various buttons. In for day to start her day, out for going home, and then out and in from lunch. Lunch punches are important to various businesses because in some states like California, not taking a lunch period or having a lunch period that was shortened by the business owner is bad, and that there are repercussions for that. The software has those business rules built into it so that we can accommodate any payroll time and attendance situation across all 50 states. The other button Terry has is a transfer button. This is the idea of tracking labor. So imagine you have field employees and you need to track the various hours that they work at client locations, or you have a crew that Greg spoke about, same scenario, but there's a number of workers at one site. You can have a manager then controlling all of those timesheets without having to keep a separate Excel file or download any app from the Play Store, for example. You can have it all real time with Sage Time and Attendance. Once they complete the activity, they will have a confirmation quickly saying, great, Terry, you've punched in, now you're done, you can start work. In the kiosk approach, it also then resets it for the next user so that if there was a Dave user, for example, he could also go home, go out to lunch, or whatever is appropriate for him. Now, Greg brought up something for salaried non-exempt type users. This scenario is becoming more and more popular because salaried non-exempt indicates that they're salaried, generally speaking, but they are not exempt from the overtime rules, so they can earn OT. Traditionally, those type of people don't punch in and punch out. It's far more convenient for those field type people, if they are working in the field would have access to an electronic timesheet, and that this timesheet will scale itself to the device that you're on. So if I'm on an iPad or I'm on my computer screen, the software will change accordingly and reflect the device that I'm on. Pretty clever. I am logged on as the Dave user in this example. He is an hourly type salaried non-exempt, and he needs to log on daily to indicate how many hours he worked in various departments. And how Dave does that is picks the appropriate day, let's say Monday. He can add some extra rows real quick and quickly indicate that he worked 3 hours in regular, charging those hours to the appropriate cost center. And then we typically pick these cost centers up from your Sage accounting platform. So we can have a regular routine import run to populate these code tables as Greg described them, and they will reflect exactly what ultimately is going to hit payroll and then get translated to your GL. Dave sees a total of how many hours he's entered so far for each day live, so he can see I've got 5 hours indicated in these various departments, and that I have a notes and comments box as well. And the notes and comments can be linked to requirements, so that if you're working in a particular cost center combination, you want to know exactly what's going on for that particular entry and can force the entry of notes and comments. As Dave completes these various entries, he can save it. And then if he wants to see what he's done for the whole pay period, he can have a little handy slide out shelf that will subtotal hours entered, total period hours, if he was getting auto paid, for example, the summary of how much PTO and sick he has left, more on that in a moment, and a labor breakdown. Where did the hours that he indicated, where did they distribute to? And he can see all of that on this little slide out. When it's appropriate, an email could accompany the timesheet report for the employees, prompting them to approve it. So they can get an email with a copy of their timesheet and a PDF. Great. I can then come to my Sage platform and click the approved button, which would appear here.
Glenn, we had a question come in just real quick. It's appropriate for where you are now. The question is, can you do this same type of entry on a mobile device? Yeah, I believe you touched on it, but if you could say that part again.
Certainly, and the answer is yes. Since we're browser-based, it will not only be usable on a mobile device, but it will scale the screen to the size of the device. And I can simulate this by restoring it, and you could imagine what this might look like on your smartphone or on your iPhone.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you, Greg.
So everyone keep those questions coming. Again, if it's relevant to where we are, I'll jump in and ask it. Otherwise, we'll be saving the bulk of them till the end.
Excellent. So as we completed the timesheet entry and we talked about web punching in and out, the other primary aspect for a time and attendance system is allowing employees to see their PTO balances, paid time off, sick, vacation. Again, Sage Time and Attendance is sensitive to where you are in the country. Some locations, cities, and states have mandatory sick rules. The state that I'm in, for example, Washington State, has an accumulated sick policy that also can be built into the Sage platform. So there's really no situation out there regulatory-wise as it pertains to time and attendance that can't be accommodated. When you log on, for example, from HRMS or even from the browser directly, the ESS screen would be something that an employee could see that looks like this, also accessible, as Greg indicated earlier, via an app on your phone. This, I think, is a little friendlier and easier to read. I've got update to my outstanding requests, so my own little personal in-out box for a status of my requests. Incidentally, that in-out box can also be relayed to their email. So if they don't want to watch this in-out box, these alerts, if you will, can be sent via email, and they can keep tabs on them from there. Beneath the request are my current balances. The nice part about these balances is that these are calculated up to the minute. This is not a 2-week behind or a 1-week behind forecasted calculation of what PTO might be right now based on utilization and so on. This is going to be a live real-time balance for as many PTO types as you need, and we would name them accordingly based on your business rules. Beneath that, we have our request mechanism. This is an email alerting mechanism that allows managers to give employees the power to electronically notify them of time off requests, for example, and that through the Sage HR data that we're importing on that regular basis, we're going to know who the correct user is that should be the recipient of the request. So in this case, the system says, great, you're going to notify somebody called Teresa Dozier. And that the software will automatically trace and route that email to as many approvers as necessary. So Dave is logged in. He's going to ask Terry for some time off. It will default to his appropriate FTE amount. So whether you're full-time, part-time, whatever a nominal day or a normal day is for a particular user, it will default accordingly, and that they can pull those PTO hours from the various buckets that they have access. So we can go into the future, and maybe I want to have a really long weekend just prior to Halloween. Got to get those decorations up. Click Add Dates. The software says, great, at the time of that request, you had 63.6 hours. And going forward, should this get approved, you'll have 39.6 hours going forward, having requested 24. Some of that scheduling that Greg was talking about is also built into the request. Maybe they're going to take half days. So all they need to do to indicate that they took a half day is change the number of hours. And if it's going to be a partial day, they can then indicate when they were leaving. So for record-keeping purposes, you know exactly where everybody was, the time of day, by the various pay types. I can put my notes and comments about why I'd like the time off and leave it at that. Keep it simple, submit the request, and Teresa would get an email from the Sage platform prompting her to approve it, decline it, or you do that same activity on the app on her phone. There is an extra step, some more of that scheduling talk. Wouldn't it be nice if Dave knew ahead of time, are these 3 days that are good to ask for off within Teresa's department? So I can bring up the PTO calendar for my coworkers of who's already approved out and quickly determine whether or not I should be asking for any of those days. So we are now in October 2019, the time period I asked for. Here are the last 3 days before Halloween. And we can see on the 30th, I'm running the risk of not getting approved because I have 4 other coworkers who are already scheduled out. The other days look fine, but on the 30th, I do have 4 coworkers who are out. So now I can either roll the dice or we can train them. If you see a scroll bar like they do on these other days, don't even bother asking. There are too many people out already and you're not going to get approved. All right. So from there, we click Submit Request. The software will then track that email request to Teresa and all the other users. And once it is approved or declined, I'm going to get this unanswered status message will change and an email from the system letting me know that I'm either approved or declined. Something novel that we've included with the time and attendance is especially for those types of businesses, warehouses, retail, and so on, where employees are notorious for forgetting to punch. You might have a system today where you're having to chase down missing punches, and it can be very tiresome and time-consuming. Well, Sage Time and Attendance can relieve you of that by letting the employees know, hey, you forgot to punch on such and such a day, send them an email, highlight it with an alert, also naturally letting their supervisor know, but I'm giving the employee an opportunity to say, hey, what time did you forget to punch in, for example? Well, I can then go to my requests and submit a punch correction request. This too will inherit those HR, the routing information of who should be the correct recipient for this kind of change. Their name appears here. And then I can indicate the date and time that I forgot to punch. What punch type was it? Maybe it was an out punch at the end of the day. And I can put my excuse or reason right in the comment box and submit that. And now hopefully I've relieved that supervisor of having to chase Dave down for that missing punch. Dave has said, hey, I forgot to punch out at a particular date and time. And is that okay? The supervisor and the administrators can always override those times, but at least we got the employee engaged and they're taking some responsibility for their timesheet.
Hey, Glenn, another question came in, and I think this one again is pretty relevant, and that is, how do you know who changed what? What is there from an auditing standpoint in the system? which again,
Great
I know the
question.
answer, but figure since you're here, might as well throw it out there.
Yep, the audit log that is built into Sage Time and Attendance is bulletproof. It tracks not only what changed, but who changed it when, and for auditors in the audience, the before and after effect of that change. So if a pay type or a punch was changed and maybe it shouldn't have been done, the audit trail can reveal that. You can re-educate that supervisor not to make that same mistake again, because again, the software is sensitive to the locality of the use of the platform. Some of those changes would adversely impact the employee's pay, and that's not something that can be done.
Good deal. All right. Thanks, Glenn. Back to you.
No, thank you, Greg. Great question. More, please. Now, these accrual summaries that I've been talking about are up-to-the-minute calculations. That's great. But often at the end of a year, whether it's a calendar year or their year of anniversary, their date of hire anniversary, rather, people often question, is this balance accurate or not? And they often have their own manual means of tracking it, and they come to an HR administrator or their supervisor asking to run reports, and another tiresome, time-consuming process that often has inaccuracies in it on behalf of the employee or the employer in that case, because they're not tracking it properly. Well, with Sage Time and Attendance, that problem goes away entirely. We'll render the balances here and give them the means to request for time off and so on. But we also will give them an accrual summary. And this is what I often say in my demos, is the accountant's view of their balance with all the credits and debits accounted for and what it was throughout the course of the year. The first screen is the balances screen, so the checkbook part. How much did you accumulate? What, if any, did you carry over from one time period to the next? Do you have hours from a previous year that you're allowed to use the following year? What you've been paid and taken for that particular plan year? Here's the clever bit, pending accrued. So future credits that you haven't earned yet but will, so that I can request time off in the future knowing it's going to be available provided I continued my employment. So pending accrued then allows me to take pending taken, future debits that will happen but won't happen until the pay period that they're impacted. And the software then will never allow me to go negative throughout the course of the year. You can also have any manual adjustments, bonuses that you might give out to an employee for whatever reason, or they're a new hire and you bonus them that during the negotiations. You can easily add a week's worth of adjustments, 40 hours or however you measure that right here. And if you do the math, it does add up to 70.4 hours available today. And I can prove that by going to the transactions and bringing up the current year, for example. And now I'll see all the credits and debits, the accrued and the taken time with a running balance, timestamps for that particular pay period. Here's some of that auditing that we talked about earlier. We get to see that somebody had logged on by Kevin was the username. Here is his IP address, the machine he was at when he did it, at what date and time he made that particular change. And that's a typical day in the life for a one-to-one employee user. Dave, when he logs on, only ever sees himself. He has all his personal request, PTO information at his fingertips, along with a timesheet, if that's appropriate for him to enter on. But we're going to move on next to the role of the supervisor. This is Dave's direct report, so that when Dave doesn't do something, this is the person who's going to get the email or the alert prompting them to log on to Sage Time and Attendance to make whatever corrections appropriate. Same interface, again, single sign-on if you've got an HRMS platform. And when that user logs on, this is the screen they see. It's a little busier, but we'll do a quick orientation. I have all of my direct reports, the different pay periods that I can edit, and the middle of the screen where I'm going to put my focus today is on what we call take action. And take action for a supervisor is relieving them quite a bit, frankly, of having to scrutinize reports. Again, in a traditional time and attendance system, you're logging on, you're running a report, you're looking at something on a screen, you then have to go to another screen to make a change, save that, run another report, and you're forever going back and forth with these multiple screens. Here we can do it all at the same time. Alerts are dynamically updated based on your various business rules. so that I can quickly monitor an early in punch, open up that timesheet, contact the manager on duty or whoever so that I can annotate why did this person come in so early, and I can quickly put that explanation here as to why, save it, and I can then tick that off of my to-do list because I've dealt with that scenario. Ideally, alerts are treated like a to-do list so that I know as a manager I've got a half a dozen or so items to take care of, ranging from early ins to early outs, long or short lunches, people being tardy, and of course the notorious missing punch. Now the missing punch is special because it can hold up payroll. So if someone's forgotten to punch 2 or 3 times, they've ignored the system's requests for the time that they had forgotten. I'm a manager, I need to get payroll done. I can still take control of the scenario, open up that broken bit of the timesheet, and the software is going to highlight in red what it thinks the out time should be. In this case, it's an out punch that's perceived missing. It simply copies the in punch time, and then I can put 4 p.m., for example, and then annotate why I needed to fix it. Save it. The software compensates for the missing punch, great, so that when I reconcile my to-do list, I have one less thing to do. And here's the dynamic nature. The system is gathering information at all times to update it accordingly. Ideally, you know you're done when the list is empty, and then you can move on to your next action item, which might be attendance tracking. Dave has had an awful lot of missing punches lately. Let's see how his attendance calendar looks. Oh no, what do we see? A sea of red. And what this is telling me is that we've color-coded our attendance so that the red and darker colors are bad, and this is a pretty bad indicator right in front of us. We've got late every day and the number of minutes late for each occurrence. And I can drill into those to see the specific shift that might have been working, the number of minutes, but maybe there's a reason for it. So we can incorporate reason codes into the software along with a points mechanism. And you can think of points, if you're not familiar with them, as a demerit. And as you accumulate these points or demerits, that the software can notify you that employees are reaching these various thresholds and what corrective action is appropriate when they hit a threshold. Someone gets 3 points, maybe they're eligible for a verbal warning from HR. The software would make that recommendation, email the HR manager so they could take action appropriately. But for the sake of the demo, let's say Dave didn't do anything wrong. He was late because he was getting something for a meeting, and I can zero out the points if I'm allowed to. I can put in an attendance comment explaining the situation. And the nice part about all the notes that are within Sage Time and Attendance, this is the documentation. Going forward, I can report on any note associated with any bit of attendance detail. You don't need to keep the paper unless for local reasons, regulatory reasons, you're required to. And then we can excuse Dave of that late in. Save it. Still noting that the late in occurred.
You know, Glenn, this isn't a question, it's more a comment. It was recently working with a customer, a current customer, and they noted that they have been using the point system, not so much as a way to see, I mean, they use it for, you know, employee accountability, but they've been using it for manager accountability. They've been able to infer that one manager has more points overall in a given pay period than another manager, and they have the same number of employees. So they've been able to determine that there may be an issue within that department, not so much the employees themselves, but is there a leadership issue? Is there a morale issue? What is going on there? So it's a different way of looking at points by looking at how the employees are doing rolled up under the managers. In most cases, it turns out it's more of a not so much managers not doing their job, but it's a situation within the department that just makes it harder for people to clock in and out on time. So in this particular case, they realized they needed to add a time clock. They needed to add a day to collection points. Because the employees had to walk a little bit further and those employees were showing a minute or 2 late. So it's a lot of information you can infer by tracking these points. It doesn't have to be a demerit. It can also be, and I think you mentioned this, Glenn, But you can also do rewards through it. So who's excelling as an employee? Who has perfect attendance? Make sure you reward those, because that can be a morale issue too. If you have an employee who's always on time and another employee in that same department who's always late, you're running the risk that that employee who is always on time might be getting a little bit disgruntled. So there's so much you can do with a point system. And on top of that, you can take this data and bring it into OrgPlus RealTime. So you can actually visualize that data by department and see that roll up of total points by each of the managers and start making some more informed decisions. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to you, Glenn. Was just yesterday was on with this customer, and they mentioned it to me, so it felt very relevant to the moment. So please continue.
Excellent point, Greg. And we do tend to focus on the problem children and not always reward those who have no attendance issues at all. And well spotted, there is a report that you run that can tell you who has no points, and have reminders that go out and say, these are the people who, as Greg explained it, who are excelling at least being on time for work. Excellent. So the story would go on if we're going to take that spin to it. So we're going to see how well Dave has done for the whole year. If April is any indication, we're sort of rolling the dice. So we can go to his attendance summary screen, which initially shows the current pay period and all of his infractions, his lates, and his approaching premiums. But I can change that look back period to the current year to see exactly how much time he spent in these various exceptions. And if this did happen under Terry, the supervisor, using Greg's example, I, as an administrator of that department or that division, or I'm the owner looking at that data via OrgPlus, I can say, you know what, if this has really been a problem, we can see how putting a time clock in and then take the same measurement 2 months later to see how it's improved, and if not, why. So absolutely, using the information, however it applies to your scenario, can vary for every single company, even within department to department. So from alerts and the attendance infractions that we've been talking about, we can now move on in the take action area to our outstanding employee requests. And here is another inbox of the various request types indicated here, along with a timestamp of when they were submitted. So if you've got a first come, first serve approach to it, and you have deadlines of when you want requests submitted by, you can quickly click the sort order, and you'll know exactly who should have the pecking order from their request getting reviewed and approved or not. So if I'm going to open up Dave's time off request, I can see he asked for 3 days in October, taking a partial day on one of them. I too can bring up that PTO calendar that Dave saw to see maybe one of those days is inappropriate. And if I'm given the authority, I can remove that day from the request, saying you can have your half day on one day and the other, but not necessarily the one in the middle. I can put all of that information in the response to Dave, click approve or decline accordingly, and it will then update the timesheet, so no extra work at this point need be done. So the timesheet is updated ahead of time, already credited with the appropriate pay types and the quantities, so that when that future payroll rolls around, it will apply those debits and credits to the pay that he's going to get and to debit the PTO that it came from. And like the alerts above, it's treated like a to-do list, so that you can see exactly which ones are outstanding and respond accordingly. Now, with any time and attendance system, there might be the need for regular reporting, and reporting on a daily basis or even on an hourly basis if you've got a business with a dynamic payroll environment. So what we do at Sage Time and Attendance is we'll design for you your own private list of automated reports that you can queue up manually, of course, but on a regular reoccurring basis, you might want to have a timesheet report distributed to all the employees personally via email. They get their own little PDF attachment of their timesheet. It takes moments to configure. You've also got the traditional reports that a manager or a manager on duty might want for hours during the shift that they're having to keep tabs on. What's going on, how many hours are being worked, and so on. Those reports will queue up here with the appropriate sort criteria. There are hundreds and hundreds of various switches, the ability to create summaries, group it by those various org levels that we talked about, those code tables. We can complete that sorting here. and then generate a report that looks something like this. This particular one is called a payroll transfer. This is the one that Greg mentioned in that reconciliation between time and attendance and payroll. Did the hours reflected in both match? And this one is being subtotaled by department for the 160.9 hours for this group, all the way through the finance department, the manufacturing department, and so on, with handy little subtotal at the bottom, which you compare with in Sage Payroll. As long as I can account for 3,070.02 hours, I know that the data transfer between them was clean. And knowing that is going to really help with the approval process. Go ahead, Greg.
Oh, I was just going to say, I don't think we need to get into, the final steps, which is where, the next piece we could go through, but for sake of time for the audience here, would be how, somebody in payroll could go in and see what the managers have done, see what the employees have done, make sure everything's been approved, and then export that time over to payroll. Not a whole lot to it. Glenn's showing you most of that, and for the sake of time, I think we probably need to get in the Q&A section. So Glenn, was there anything else that you needed to show to kind of put a bow on things, or you think
there's
we
just
can
one,
go into the Q&A?
The newest feature that we can show off, the Analyze tab. So this is
right. Okay.
This is an up-to-the-minute calculation for analyzing your employees, so that data exchange between HRMS or the Sage platform would reflect to those managers what their active count is, were there any new hires, and if there were any terminated folks, they would get notified here. Perhaps they got to collect collateral, keys to the building, things like that. But more interestingly are the hours and wages. I'm only taking hours into account for today, but this is a up-to-the-minute calculation for the current pay period of all of the hours that have been accumulated, and that we have drill-down access to the various pay types and one-click access to export that to Excel. Create your own pivot tables, import it into any other data aggregator, and then compute reports of your own liking.
That's I hadn't actually seen that, so everyone on the call here, wow, that's pretty cool. I hadn't seen that yet.
Take it away, Greg.
All right. Yeah. So, Helen, if you're still on, unfortunately, for some reason now I can't get to the questions. They're not showing, but I believe you still have access. So, if you could go ahead and throw them at us, please.
Yes, we have a few that have come in. One is asking, can we please see the biometrics and how that works when we look at the actual software?
Okay. And I think we can, Glenn, I'm sorry, go ahead.
There was a follow-up. There was a follow-up to that question, and that was, will you ever go with the facial recognition process?
Okay. So, Glenn, I don't know if you have an image you can pull up of the biometrics, and I'll address that second part if you want to hunt around for it. I
have some news on the facial recognition, if you like.
Oh, well, go ahead.
Yep, we are researching that. So although we haven't released it yet, we are in the process of coming out with the Insperity facial recognition clock. It is still yet unnamed. The biometrics that we do support are of two varieties. We support a capacitive reader, so it uses your fingerprint, pretty much the ridges and furrows that are on your fingerprints, and what's also another type of reader called a subcutaneous reader, meaning it will fluoresce the capillaries in your fingertip and use the mapping of the capillaries along with the ridges and furrows in your fingertip to confirm your identity. So those are the two that we have today, but facial recognition is in our future.
And that's great. So they are using fingers. Again, you can enroll multiple fingers there. It is a validation, so it's not an identification. So, we have played around with the identification types where I walk up and I just put my thumb on there and punch in. Unfortunately, these clocks do not have super processors in them. So the ability to wade through, 150 stored templates you won't get that kind of performance out of them to be able to do that. So the industry's really stayed more towards validation. So the employee would identify themselves with a keypad entry of their ID. They'd swipe a badge, wave their key fob. Then they would validate that by placing their finger or having their face scanned. So just a key point there. It is identification that allows the clock to be very, very quick. So punching with biometrics is still 3 seconds at most. Okay. Any other? Were there any other?
We do, but were we able to get the biometrics within the software? See how that would work?
Oh yeah, Glenn, do you have a clock shot that you could show?
I don't understand the question, Helen. The biometrics are contained within the clock.
Okay, so
there's nothing to see within
they're asking
Sage
how that
time and
would
attendance.
work. Okay. And I'll send you these questions at the end too, so if they make better sense written out than the way that I'm regurgitating them, then feel free to reach out to the person who's asked them.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, we do have a few more questions. Can employees enter their time on the timesheet after the fact? For example, a week later before payroll is ran.
Yes.
And then the follow-up was, or does that time entered have to be entered the same day as the work is performed?
It can be entered after the fact. You do have to get it in, obviously, by payroll, because once a pay period is closed, only administrators can edit a closed timesheet.
Okay, thank you. And then lastly, in a job shop situation, will the job numbers from sales orders automatically be available for employees to choose from?
We have a number of ways that we can achieve that. We would want to work with the individual sales order system to see how we would facilitate it, either using an API integration if they're amenable to that, but at the very least, we could import an Excel file or a CSV file and make them as available as quickly as running that process.
Okay. We do have a few short minutes left, so if anyone else has questions, now would be the time to ask them. If anything comes up after the fact, feel free to reach out to us and we'll make sure to get you in touch with the right person who can answer your question. So it doesn't look like we have any more questions that have come in. So I think that concludes the webinar, unless our presenters have anything else they would like to add or any closing remarks.
Just, again, that biometric question, if it was, can we see what it looks like? The clock here is being displayed and you can see that. So it's full keypad, multiple function keys. So you can do ins and outs and department transfers, job transfers, whatever the case may be. But then you can see the plate in there where they would place their finger for validation. These clocks are extremely modular. So we've had people upgrade to biometrics after going with a badge type clock. They've wanted to add the finger biometrics to it, and it's kind of thing we can just ship the module out and the customers can replace them. They're really solid, very robust clocks. We have overnight depot service on the hardware as well. So if something goes wrong, we either get you the replacement part or a replacement clock, typically overnight.
Okay. And then a follow-up question has come up. What is the investment look like for something like this?
That is, there's a lot of dependencies on that. So how many employees you have, what systems we're going to be tying into, if it's just, say, like HRMS, or are we looking to pull some of the job data from your sales system for doing job costing. All of those factors come into play. So, if you were to contact your SWK representative, they can give you probably a ballpark on the software. The implementation side of things can vary greatly. And that's where you can't really throw anything out on that. It's all dependent on what it is you do, what you need to accomplish, and what it's going to take to get you there. So unfortunately, I can't give you a straight answer.
We'll take that one offline and make sure that this attendee gets their questions answered. So
Sure.
It doesn't look like anything else has come in. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, other than just Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you everybody for joining us today. I hope you got a lot out of it, and thank you, Glenn, for as always doing a fantastic job.
Thank you, Greg.
Thanks everyone.
Everybody for attending.
That concludes the webinar. If you have any questions, just feel free to reach out to us. We'll be sending the recording tomorrow with a follow-up email address if you do have any questions. So thanks again and have a nice day.